there's this really sad joke. I mean, it's a sad joke, to be honest, because I don't know how else to describe it. I think I'm just going to let Mo tell the joke himself.
Yesterday, I was in the Uber, same story. The Uber driver, I'm like, this Uber is nice. He's like, yeah, cool. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I drive Uber. Okay, where you come from? Afghanistan. What were you doing back home? I was a dentist. I owned a bunch of dentist businesses, and I also owned a factory. And like now he's driving Uber in Canada. So that story is like, it's almost like a joke, but have you heard that they said that the best place to have a car accident or heart attack is an Uber? Because there's very high likelihood that the person driving you is a doctor.
So yeah, it's really sad, to be honest, because I don't know how else to describe that. I mean, it sounds funny, but it's not funny. It's life, right? Yeah, so Mo is a really exciting fella. You know, I find him really interesting, especially because of what he's doing with SkillHat. And so me and him talked about his business, why he started the business, all the amazing things they've done. We also talk about, you know, the differences between running a business in Nigeria and Canada, and the difference between the Canadian pace and the American pace of business. We talked about parenting. It was a really interesting conversation. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I have with me Mo, who I find pretty interesting because I feel like what he's doing right now is trying to solve a pain that he experienced as a young immigrant. But before we get into all the what he's doing right now, welcome on the Newcomers Podcast. How's your day going, man?
It's busy. It's busy. I'm glad I didn't cancel. I almost canceled this. That's how busy it is these days. Lots of priorities. I know I moved this twice.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy that I made time. It's been nice connecting with you. You're a pretty cool guy, very warm and nice to connect with. And what you're doing is very important. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So we're kind of going to dive right into it. And I'm just going to go back to, you mentioned in the pre-show you moved when you were 16.
Yeah. I moved to Canada at 16 years old. My dad had a lot of faith in me. He was one who believed in education. So he sent me out here. I finished high school at 16 years old. In Nigeria, we do finish high school at 16 and 15, whereas here in Canada, they finish at 18. And so that actually made me go 2 years back. I finished high school in Nigeria. I was supposed to go to university, but I came to Canada and I went back to like grade 11. So that was interesting. So I came here all alone as an international student. I came to the city of Hamilton to a high school here, and then I did 2 years of high school. Did really well, killed it, had like amazing grades. So when you guys, I was training, like I was teaching everybody. Obviously, I was like already supposed to be in university, and I went to the University of Toronto. So I came here at 16. I've been here 16 years.
Damn. You know, I just kind of dig into that and just ask, like, what was that process like? You know, from a kid who's ready to go into uni, because I can imagine if when I finished secondary school in Nigeria, and then you told me that I had to go somewhere and then kind of go back to 2 classes back. Like, how did that feel, and how did that?
I wasn't too worried about it because we came in a cohort, so I already had a community. I came to Canada on a plane with 18 other people who were my age. So there was this lady, Mrs. Djibouti. She had a business of exporting Nigerian kids to Canada. So she would get all the people who could afford to send their kids out here. She partnered with high schools in Canada, partnered with parents in Nigeria. So she was doing that business. So I came on this country with maybe 22 or 25 or 18, I'm not sure the number, of us from Nigeria going to the same high school in Canada. So because of that community feel, it was a bunch of us. It was exciting at the airport. Like, oh shit, you coming to Canada too? And then we all landed in Canada in the same school. We went to different homestays. So I lived in Canada. You know, my transition to Canada was so smooth because I lived in a homestay. So a homestay is where you live with a Canadian couple, family. So I was like in the penthouse of a Canadian family's home, Jamie and his wife. So it was a very, very good, cool experience. I was just so happy to be out of Nigeria. I didn't really care what grade or what country. I'm like, just get me out of here. And I knew I was on the path to go to university, so it didn't matter too much to me.
But I mean, like, I understand. Like, I like the fact that you talk about all that smooth feeling and all that. But was there any change that you struggled with at that point in time, or was it all just like, you know, young kid, happy to be out of Nigeria? You didn't even bother about everything that was going on.
I wouldn't say I struggled as much. People who struggle are people who are already balanced and settled in their home countries. They have kids, they have families, and then they move. So it's really tough then. And that's what we're solving for at SkillHat. That's exactly what we're solving for. People who are young have time. They have 4 years to go to university. I spent 2 more years going to high school. And I was already conditioned to that because if you go to the UK instead, you do A levels. So in my mind, I'm like, there's a process, right? So I struggle with the cold. What I say I miss my parents? Not really. I was happy to be all alone. I love my independence. I'm like, this is lit. I'm like, Canada, eating McDonald's. I'm not eating Nigerian food. I was cool with it, to be honest. I would, if I could think of a struggle, I can't. I had money. Everything was chill. And that's the true point. One, I had community. I had support from my parents. I had a smooth landing, and I was prepared for it. The problem is when you come to Canada, you're already a CEO or a boss in your home country. You leave all that, you come here, you work in the factory. That's the problem you gotta tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just talking, and that point really hits me. Like I've been in an Uber, and then the fella is telling me that back home he used to be a pharmacist, like a senior pharmacist, and then he moved to Canada, and he just has to go through a process where he has to do past, what do they call that thing, certifications and stuff.
Yes, happened to me yesterday. Yesterday I was in an Uber, same story. The Uber driver, I'm like, this Uber is nice. He's like, yeah, cool. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I drive Uber. Okay, where you come from? Afghanistan. What were you doing back home? I was a dentist. I owned a bunch of dentist businesses, and I also owned a factory. And like now he's driving Uber in Canada. So that story is like, it's almost like a joke. But have you heard that they said that the best place to have a car accident or heart attack is an Uber because there's very high likelihood that the person driving you is a doctor?
I've heard that somewhere. And when I heard it, like I was so traumatized by that story or that joke. Someone said it somewhere. I read it somewhere, and the person says, like, if you're in an Uber in Canada, like you shouldn't be worried about anything. Like if you fall sick in there, you're going to be okay because it's so likely that the driver is the doctor, surgeon, someone. I said, listen, that is not funny. Like that's not funny.
It's funny, but it's not. It's terrible. It's actually terrible.
And now, despite all these beautiful things and all that stuff, I want to ask, like, so was there like any moment for you where it really hit you like that? Like this is so cool, but this is not how it should be. Because I'm really interested in how, someone who's had such a great landing, you came in smoothly. And thinking about SkillHat, I mean, you can talk about what SkillHat does right now, but thinking about what you're doing with SkillHat now, like, how did you get to that point? Because to me, when I saw your profile or when I saw your stuff on LinkedIn, my first thought was like, yo, this dude is solving the problem he went through while in high school. But then you're telling me that
yes,
was chill.
I was able to find that problem. So let me explain. So I'll tell the folks what SkillHat is, just for those who are listening who might not be familiar with us. SkillHat is an edtech company. Our mission is to launch people who are really motivated into tech careers. We've been around for 3 years, so just 2.5 years. In that time, we've trained. By the end of this year, we'll have trained about 1,000 students who have transitioned into amazing tech careers. We focus on tech roles and tech training. We have 8 programs, have a lot of programs. Training in business analysis, agile project management, user experience design, web development, product management, AI and no-code software development. We also have one-on-one coaching program. And there's one that I'm missing. And then our career accelerator, which is a hands-on experience where you build products like a venture studio agency for startups to get the hands-on experience, which is one of our most impressive programs I'm most proud of. But how did I find out about this program, about this business and why? Just a few more stats on the impact we've made. The average alumni from our programs increases their income by 45K. So if they're making 60K before they came in, they're making 105K. We've helped a lot of women change their lives. We focus on women, focus on newcomers. We've seen people take our programs go from making 30K a year to making 30K a month. We've seen some amazing numbers as far as like people who take our programs, they get promoted twice in the same year, and then they take their boss's job. Their boss gets fired, they take over their boss's job, just with some very strong training, coaching, networking. So our process is you take a technical training program in whatever field you want to get into. After technical training, you go through our accelerator, which is the hands-on experience where you actually work on a product with a team, a cross-functional team for a startup or launch a startup yourself, and then you have a one-on-one coach who works with you to succeed. So they're coaching you in your interviews, they're coaching you on your resume, they're making connections, and we have a networking piece. So 4-step program, training, hands-on accelerator, coaching, and then networking. So that's what we do at SkillHat. It's been very impactful, very proud. We just won the award this year for the Black Product Innovators of the Year award from OPSD and BMO Bank of Montreal. And we're making a lot of strides. We just got a government grant to train 300 people in coding and design. Essentially, the government's not giving us money to just say, keep doing what you're doing. We'll just give you money. You don't have to do any marketing or sales, just training people who pay for it. So we're very excited about all that stuff that's happened. Shout out to World Innovation League, who helped us get that grant. Shout out to our partners, Collab, Attila, and Ripen. So I wanted to just touch on what we're doing to give context. So now, how did I find this problem? Because everything was so smooth for me, right? Apparently. Well, the story is I went to high school in Hamilton, Southern Ontario College. Then I got into University of Toronto. I went in for commerce. I failed in the first year. It was terrible. I hated it. I didn't understand accounting and stuff because I thought commerce was about making money, which it is. But in Nigeria, in high school, I did sciences. I did biology and chemistry and physics. So the transition wasn't there. So I left that, but I loved playing video games and I loved music. And then I found out about a program called Digital Enterprise Management, which is about management of technology. So that included learning about designing websites, finance, a bit about communication, technology, editing, film. So like a broad mix of like multimedia, communications, business. So the business of technology. And I was like, this is dope. So I did that. I did very well in that. I graduated with flying colors from U of T. But the thing is, I struggled to get a job, but not as bad as other people. So the struggle was a little bit there, but I got a job still pretty quick within like 3 months, 4 months, because I had volunteered a lot in school. So I worked as a project manager for a Heart and Stroke Foundation. And in that role, I was a project manager, I was a BA, I was a quality assurance. Essentially, I was working for a startup, but that was my big client. So I did everything. So I learned all these skills. I went back to Nigeria. That was the turning point. I went back to Nigeria because my friend, many of you who may know him, he's a big, popular techie. He's the most popular techie in Africa, probably. Inyolua Aboyeji. You heard of E?
Yeah.
Co-founder of Andela. So he was starting Andela with Jeremy Johnson. And so Jeremy Johnson is this big guy in the States. He was 30 years old, just got the award from Forbes as Forbes 30 under 30. This guy, Jeremy, had taken his company public to $1 billion. Jeremy partnered with my friend E to launch Andela. Andela is a company who trains the smartest people in Africa and places them to work for U.S. companies. This was in 2017, so this was like outsourcing pre-COVID. So they said they wanted someone to help with like project management curriculum, help with like building out the business. And they said they just raised $4 million from the co-founders of Facebook and Carmela Anthony. I'm like, this is dope. They're like, do you want to get aboard? I'm like, yes. So I left my job, gave them a 2-week notice, and I was in Nigeria in 1 week. So that was like just leaving everything in Canada and going back to Nigeria. And Andela did that for a while. We grew the company. So I experienced going from a company of 10, 20 people to 1,000 people in a very short time. So I experienced that rapid growth of a startup and started to understand the impact of education. So at Andela, we were training security guards, house girls, house boys. That means like domestic servants, so to speak. People who already had jobs in like marketing were getting paid a little bit. We trained them in 6 months. And in 6 to 7 months, they became proficient, and they were now developers for U.S. companies like IBM and Facebook and GitHub. So I saw that transformation happen. I helped build the company in terms of operations, training, project management. I did some sales work there as well. So after a while, like I got recruited by the Nigerian government to help them launch a fund to invest in startups. Did that for a while. So I left Andela for that company called Idea. Did that one for another year and a half. Got recruited again by another company called Edutech. Now, Edutech Edutech helps African universities build online versions of on-campus programs. So essentially helping schools like OAU, which is like the biggest university in Nigeria, Ahmadu Bello, Babcock, build fully e-learning versions of on-campus programs. So the problem we're trying to solve there, I got hired as the VP of product development. So that was my first executive role. I was like 24 years old or 25, and I was a VP of a $100 million company. And so these experiences helped me get to where I am. This is where I'm going deep into all these experiences. And so when I joined that company, I saw the problem in Africa is that there's a massive demand for education, but not enough supply, right? Let me give you the math. Every year, at the time, 1 million kids write the exam to go into university, right? Of that 1 million kids, guess how much space we have in universities?
Probably like not up to 5% of that space. I mean, I do think it's about, I suspect, I've seen a number, someone saying 18% somewhere, because at some point in my life, I did
26 to 30%.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, which is that means that 700,000 kids, even though they're qualified, you just don't have enough space to get into these schools. And so we solve that problem through e-learning. You can't build enough facilities, enough buildings.
Yeah.
So we help these universities build fully functional 4-year e-learning programs where these kids could take them on their phones and their iPads. So that was my claim to fame. So I helped launch the first online MBA in Nigeria. We started off with like MBAs, and then we moved back to like universities. That online MBA, I launched that program with Ahmadu University as a program manager. The MBA can only take 300 people per year. And then we moved in, when we launched the online version, within 3 months, guess how many people came in? 1,000 people.
Wow.
So we went from 300 every year at the max to an extra 1,000 within 3 months. Just show you the demand. A lot of the work involved not just the tech. The tech was important because they had to work offline, not just online due to internet, but also dealing with things like lobbying. So that program had to be accredited. So you had to do some policy work because, it's funny, like the regulators will say stuff like education is a test of education is a test of character and intelligence. You can't test character online. They have to come to the campus. And so we had to convince the regulators that online education was a viable means of education. So it involved a lot of lobbying, policy changes. That was actually the work. Beyond just the tech and the curriculum, a lot of the work was like making this acceptable and influencing. I did that. So this is where the SkillHat problem came in. So keep in mind, my experience, I'd worked in tech in Canada, gone back to Nigeria, helped build tech training for development and coding, helped invest in startups for the government, and then helped build online programs for universities. So all that experience of investing, building for training, and then building for infrastructure for schools. When I came back to Canada, I now struggle to get a job back in Canada. Yeah. I'm like, I have all these great experience, but I was struggling. I wouldn't say struggling, but I just wanted to do it fast, right? You come back to a new country, you don't have 5-6 months to apply. You're paying rent in dollars. You have all these expenses. So I went to a boot camp. So I went to Topper Consulting Boot Camp to learn business analysis and just build a community, because my community was now in Nigeria. I was in Nigeria for 3 years. So that was now where I saw that the boot camp experience was so valuable for a newcomer. Boot camps help you with quick training, very specific to what you need to learn.
Yes.
University, you're learning, like you're taking 5, 6, 7 courses over a long time, over a year or two, even if it's a master's program. So undergrad is 4 years, right? A lot of immigrants don't have that time. But the problem with the boot camp is this. You take the boot camp, you learn a skill, but how do you get that job, right? How do you tell the employer that you've been able to, you have the experience that they need? So that was the innovation that we had at SkillHat. People were lying in the boot camp. People would just take the boot camp and say, yeah, I learned business analysis, but I also have 20 years of experience. They would just doctor their resumes and just put a bunch of stuff in there. So we wanted to move away from that. And how we solve for that is that if you, for example, wanted to become a business analyst or a project manager, you come to SkillHat, you take the training in our boot camp, but we actually will put you on a client project in a cross-functional team. So because we train for all the roles, we train for software development, we train for design, we train for business analysis, product management, we put you into a venture studio, an innovation lab, where you launch a product for a startup. So now you actually have experience saying, I built this product now has 7,000 users. Here's what I've learned. Here's actually what I've done. And then you get the experience. And then now we also will coach people to get a job. We have one-on-one coaches, and then we have networking events. So when I came back to Canada, I worked for the government. I hated it, and I quit that job. I did join an insurance company as a VP as well. And then I quit that job to start SkillHat. So that was like what happened in Canada: government, insurance, and then SkillHat. Hope that kind of gives you a sense of the story.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Like, I'm just curious. Like, why did you come back to Canada?
Great question. The dollar, man. The naira was falling badly. Like, I think I was getting paid in a VP role in Nigeria. I was getting paid $50,000 a year, but in naira, it was 10 million naira a year. I was getting paid for that role. It was a lot of money, 10 million naira a year for like a 24, 25-year-old kid, because my colleagues were getting paid maybe 2 million naira a year, right? So I was making times 5 what my average age of colleague was making. But then that was negotiated in naira. But then the dollar kept going down. So what was 50K was now like 40K, 45. Right now, 10 million naira is $10,000.
Yeah, that's
what was 50K is now 10K.
Yeah.
In naira. So that was one. Two, my family's here. My parents are here. My parents are in Canada. They've been here actually for a while. So I just felt alone. Plus, like my mom was like, "When are you gonna get married?" You know, I was dating girls in Nigeria. I felt like I knew I'll come back to Canada long term. So I was like, if I want to get in a relationship there, I don't want to like move. I didn't want all that. So I was like, I'm just gonna move now and then start my life in Canada. And that's what happened. I came here in a short time. I actually got married and just started my new life within one place versus kind of moving around.
That's interesting. And it's actually pretty interesting that you're almost like you're double immigrants. I mean, it's back to the same place, but like back foot.
Yeah, exactly.
Just curious. When you spent time in Canada and went back to Nigeria, what was it like settling back into Nigeria again?
I think that was the tough transition that I didn't have when I came to Canada the first time. It was rough, but also good. Again, every time you're transitioning, I learned this thing from one of my pastors. He says, manage transitions carefully, which is it depends on kind of transition. But in life, there's always transitions.
Yeah.
Right? Transition from one job to another, from being single to being married, country to another, right? So it was tough because I was used to certain luxuries, like just having power all the time, something simple like that, or knowing I could take the bus when I wanted to take an Uber. When I first got there, it wasn't like the same. So what was tough? Was, I guess, just like being in a different environment. I had a Canadian accent. So people will like make fun of me, like, what is this guy coming to tell us now? Like, what do you...
Yeah. You know, you need to speak English.
Yeah, exactly. Like people making fun of me. But I'm like, I'm still like an Naija guy at heart. In a business meeting, I'm not gonna like the presentation, I'm just being myself. But like, tone this down. No, all this English you speak more. So that culture shock of like, it's the same me, but like this is how I present. But again, I always reference what worked for me. So I've been very blessed in life, and I'll admit that, in the sense that with my transitions, somehow God just always helped me have the right cushioning effect, and which is why I wanted to pay that back and build a cushioning effect type of business. And so I transitioned through Andela. They flew me back home. They paid for my ticket.
Nice.
They paid for my car to get shipped. They paid for my furniture. They housed me. So I lived in Jacob News in Java. And I went there with the goal and the purpose. I was there for a mission to build a business. So, as much as it was rough with like, people making fun of you and like just like the culture shock and like, heat and all these little things, again, it was smooth and I was blessed. So I don't want to come here and make it feel like it has to be rough. If you do the right things and you are able to get the right support, things do not have to be rough for you. And that's kind of like my key message, and I help people with that as well.
Now, like, just curious, like, so now that you've done this, came to Canada, went back to Nigeria, came back to Canada, where's home for you, to be honest? Like, what is home? Home is Canada.
Because of my wife, especially. Like, in my life, I like to travel a lot. My wife does not like Nigeria at all. She's had a bunch of bad experiences. She does not like to step foot there. I like to go home. I like to travel everywhere. But home is just purely in Canada. That's the truth.
And like, if I was to ask you, like, now that you've come back here, what do you miss most about your time back in Nigeria? and that's your time back when you worked there as
Mm-hmm.
someone who had spent time in Canada and then went back to Nigeria to live there for a bit.
Yeah, so the experience of being in Nigeria was so unique. Nigeria is a place where there's a lot of room for innovation because there's so many problems.
Yeah.
The average person in Canada just wants to get a really good job, get their RSP and just chill, right? Maybe a side hustle. In Nigeria, everyone's like running a business or some sort, right? So I miss that innovative spirit. I mean, all the guys, I told you a bunch of guys brought me back. These guys are 23 years old and 30 years old. They had raised a couple million from investors. So Nigeria was a place where there's a lot of innovation, a lot of innovative fire. So that's one thing I miss. Like, I don't have many entrepreneur friends. I don't think I have any single entrepreneur friend in Canada. All my friends working really good jobs at the best companies in the world. But in Nigeria, everyone's an entrepreneur. Everyone has a business. Everyone has like a side hustle. It's just a way of so that's one thing I miss. I miss the food, good food. I miss the weather. I do not like the Canadian weather. Once we have this cold, once I'm done, I got to go up and shovel the snow. It's annoying shoveling snow all the time. I miss just the influence you can have. Like, I was writing policy documents for the university council on how policies for education should be at 24 years old. In Canada, you have to have worked for a long time, usually, to have that authority and those opportunities. So as a young person, you get a lot of opportunity in Nigeria if you're smart because there's so many problems.
Yeah.
And the impact you can make. If I was still in my job, as a project manager at an insurance company, I think I would be depressed right now. Yeah, I quit. I mean, what we're doing at SkillHat, the pace of innovation, like, we've grown the company to a great valuation in a short time. That's what I like doing. And you don't always have the chance to move that fast and break things in Canada. In the US, maybe.
Yeah.
In Canada, there's the mentality and the pace is a bit slower, and everything is just set. Oh, look at telecommunications. It's the same telco companies.
Yeah.
Big three, big four, Rogers, Fido, which is the same company, really. TELUS.
Yeah.
Bell.
And Roger just bought Shaw. So, like, literally, like.
Exactly. Look at the banks. Same big four banks. RBC, TD, CIBC. Whereas in the US, it's like 40, 50 banks. Anyone can just start a bank tomorrow, right? You blow, right? Look at the industry of media and TV. All the big actors and artists, Bieber, Drake, they just go to the States and they make it there. So Canada is a place where you can innovate, but I think there's some constraints around big business, and there's like oligopolies and monopolies. So it's not as open. So that's one thing I miss about Nigeria, to answer your question. It's open, it's wide. You can do anything you want, start anything you want, and just make it big.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Like, I do struggle a bit with the Canadian pace. Like, I used to work for an American company, which I just left a couple of weeks ago. Like, gosh, the pace is amazing. The pace, like, it's dizzying at times. Canada, not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much. Now, something I'm going to ask you, which is, like, I know your parents are here. I assume your parents, you all live in the same place, like the same.
Yeah, they live about an hour from me. They live in Brampton. We live in Ancaster.
Okay. What are your thoughts? Like, what are your thoughts on parenting? Now you have an 8-month-old. You're a Nigerian, Canadian Nigerian with Nigerian grandparents 1 hour away with a Nigerian mom. Like, and then you're living in Canada, raising your child in Canada as an immigrant. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, how are you going to balance that? Straddling the two cultures, which you have to straddle as an immigrant. Like, how do you plan to do that?
So, with regards to parenting, there's a lot of great things about Canadian parenting culture. There's some things that aren't so great. And on the flip side with Nigeria. So let's talk about the great things on both sides. I'll be really quick, right? The great thing about the Canadian parenting culture is that the kids have freedom. The kids are encouraged to express themselves, and they're encouraged to explore. The bad thing is that it can become too much. It become too much, like, independence from a young age. It could become too much, not enough respect for elders and for parents. I don't want that, right? I want my kids to be free, but also know their limits. And then there's too much exposures. Like, in school, they're teaching them about being able to choose their own sexuality. I don't believe a child should be said to just say, "Oh, you can choose. You are a boy if you are a boy. This is what God made you." Maybe when you get to 18, you can learn, but don't expose them to that stuff in school from a young age and say, "You have a chance." Question it. Are you really a boy? Dude, you're a boy. If God gave you a penis, you're a boy. I'm gonna say it openly. I'm a very honest guy. I'm open. I don't hide my feelings about stuff like that, right? So there's too much exposure to things that they should not be exposed to at a young age, and they start to question things that they have no business questioning, right? Too much choice. I believe in constraints. The best people in the world, Serena Williams, her dad told her, here's what you got to do. He conditioned her. She's the best player in the world. Same for Tiger Woods. Same for Mike Tyson. They were conditioned, and look where they turned out, right? So you need to guide kids in the way that they should go, not just leave them with too much freedom. Now, on the flip side in Nigeria, the best things about Nigerian culture with raising kids is that they're raised to be respectful, they're raised to be disciplined, they're raised to be very hands-on, right? Solving problems. They're raised to have that hustle mentality. The bad things is that it's kind of like the opposite, really. They're just shut up there. When I'm talking, you don't talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They don't allow kids to always speak their minds. What else is tough about it? There's not that bond between parents and children. There's this authority figure. When daddy comes home, everyone run away. You go hide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And then in Canada, in Nigeria, I believe in actually not sparing the rod. I believe sometimes you got to discipline the child. Give him some African magic. Give him some. Let them know that if you act up, you're gonna get something on your bum. I actually believe in that. I believe that that fear of like dad might actually like let me know what's going on makes children to act right. In Canada, that's not allowed, right? You can't spank your kids. So it's kind of like having a mix of both. So we will allow our kids to be free, but also let them know that this is the limit. Be respectful. If you move out of those boundaries, we're gonna let you know what's going on. Give us some African magic, and then at the same time, give them that hustle, that discipline. Like, there's no entitlement. You got to go get it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of like how we're kind of trying to marry both.
I think the thing about the human being is that we often start something and then we just overdo it. And that's like both cultures have that issue where the Canadian part has its own issues I struggle with. The Nigerian part also has its own issues I struggle with. And I agree with you that somehow is one saying to themselves is that the advantage of being an immigrant is that you have the benefit of both two cultures. So why don't you just take full advantage and say, why don't you take the good parts of everything and meld it into something, and then just see what it turns out, what the kid turns into.
Yeah, because one culture is perfect. Like Thai, yes. I don't even know Thai. I know the videography.
Yes, I know.
I went to LA, and LA is celebrated as this perfect place with so much opportunity. But he saw that in LA, there's a lot of homelessness, and it's really expensive. There's issues. Even though LA is this place where you have Hollywood, there's actually people who are homeless, and there's issues there as well. There's a lot of drug abuse on Skid Row. So he was making the point that he's coming from Nigeria thinking America's perfect. No place is perfect. So same way, no culture is perfect. So it's all about taking the best of different worlds, taking what you don't want, doing what you want, just following blindly is kind of what we're all about in our family.
I always talk to my wife about finding the balance between respecting authority, but being bold enough to challenge authority.
I love it.
You need to understand authority doesn't know everything. And like in their school, they know us that we're so involved because I believe that I like education, but I still think that education is not preparing my kids for the world they're going to face. So a teacher will tell me something, I'll be like, okay, I want to understand why. Because I also need to understand that, like, for example, my child's going to grow up in a world where AI can do amazing things. So why should my child understand how to use ChatGPT? My 7-year-old I started asking questions that I'm like, okay, let's go and check Google. Because you know what? You're probably going to have an AI agent that you're just asking the question you want to ask when you're old enough. So why am I going to say to you that you have to use your brain? Like, I want you to be smart enough to undo all that stuff. But you also need to understand that your ability to find, synthesize information will set you apart in the world where there's so much information. And that's where we're going to, but that, I think my last question for you is, what's one question I should have asked you that you think other immigrants planning to immigrate could learn from? Because I think you have a really interesting experience.
Well, I mean, I'll go to the answer straight versus the question.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Question. I think people just need to plan better. They need to also have more exposure, more networks. Because you don't know what you don't know. So give yourself enough time to assume you don't know things and find what you might not know. A few experiences for me that have, like, if I think of critical moments that getting exposed helped me, I'll talk about a few things. One is just books, right? 2, network, and then 3, like, just technical knowledge. So technical knowledge, I guess I'll start there. Don't be afraid to invest in your education, man. That's the first advice for new immigrants. So if the question was, what are the key things that immigrants need to be successful? I guess that might be the question. And I'll start with a few things that helped me be successful. Technical knowledge. The education I got from U of T was very, very important for me because I threw myself at it. But if I used that alone, I would be nowhere, right? So I guess that's the fourth thing, volunteering and networking. So I'll kind of break it down. So technical knowledge, I've seen people take only a 3-4 month course, and like just from that one course at SkillHat, they just change their lives. People who were in customer service, who had some course personality traits of listening effectively, documenting effectively, solving customer problems over the phone at Rogers or whatever company doing phone service, use that skill in a different way as a BA or as a project manager, because they learned the technical elements of the software development lifecycle, and they learned about technical elements of let's say marketing, like SEO or web design. It's the same skill set or the same personality trait, but applied in a technical context makes you more valuable. So no matter where you are, just get more technically sound is the first thing, and that's what helped me as well. The second thing that I think really changed my life that helped me in the next order was just volunteering. So it's all about, today, it's not just about what you know and what you learned, which is so critical, but what have you built? What have you done? So I was able to get my first job coming out of college because I volunteered so much when I was in university. I volunteered with the African Students Association as a marketing coordinator. I also volunteered with the tech club doing a tech conference, which helped me get exposed to tech founders and CEOs who gave me a job just by volunteering with doing the conference. So that was very important. So a lot of people just don't volunteer. Like, people will learn a skill and they just work on your resume and just stay home and keep applying. You got to go out there and build stuff. Build. Because what you build builds you. Yes. Especially in today's day and age. It's a very competitive environment, so you want to set yourself apart by building stuff. And I guess that's the word. It's about building. So whether you're building through volunteering or building through starting a business or building through taking a side project at work, just go build. Building things makes you really even know, do you actually like doing this thing?
Yeah.
And then that's when the energy comes in. If you're building stuff for yourself and you love it, that is signal. If you're building stuff and you hate it, it's like, okay, you know what? I actually don't even like doing this thing in the first place. So that's the first 2 things. Technical skills, building. The third is just a network. There's few people who I've met in my life that changed my life. They were opening doors to key things. The first key person was when I was actually volunteering for this tech conference and going to other schools to help them get informed about our conference. I went to Waterloo. That's where I met Ian Aboyeji, co-founder of Andela. After like 2 years, he remembered me. He called me. He's like, bro, I remember you from that conference. I actually came. I presented. And we're starting this thing. We just got some money. We got $4 million. We need people to just help us build a business. You want to come to Nigeria? I'm like, yes. I went out there. My life changed from one conversation that I met like 2 years before. Another key person I networked with, the first job I got was through just going for a regular thing my mom said to come for. She was going for a recruiting event. I just drove her there and I went in and I got hired on the spot by a different guy. Networking with my job with Andela, one of the CEOs of VGG came around. We talked. I pitched him a thing. He called me after 9 months. It's a trend. People call you after like a year. So the thing about networking is that people they network when they have a problem.
Yes.
When they have a need. That's not going to work. You just network and put yourself out there before you have the need. You do it just to do it. You do it to add value to people. And that's the tip of networking. So it's the trick. When you network, don't go to people and say, oh, I need this, I need that. You network to, one, just learn. Say, oh, tell me what you're doing and just be interested. But 2, you network to add value. So I meet a guy in a conference. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm doing SkillHat. I'm running this. Help me, get more students. Help me get a government grant to do more. It's more like asking the person, hey, what are you doing? what's your biggest goal and what help do you need to get there? I promise you, if you ask every single person you meet, what's your biggest goal and what help do you need to get there, people will always remember you, because you're going to make them really think critically about where they're trying to go. And then don't just ask to ask. When they tell you, think about, you might not have the solution, but maybe say, oh, I know a person who may have the solution. Connect those two people together. Right now, you've really changed the course of life and how, as you connect, they do things.
Yeah.
So immigrants, first thing is technical skills. 2, build. 3, just network as much as possible. The next guy who really helped me network was Toby Oluwole, who's a co-founder of 3 Skills, or rather, the next guy who I remember networking with that just really helped me like put things in perspective is Toby Oluwole, who co-founder of 3 Skills. Like, how he thinks is so different. He taught me about LinkedIn storytelling. Dozie, how do you find out about me?
LinkedIn.
Exactly. He just taught me how to tell stories on LinkedIn. He gave me access to his course, the LinkedIn Blueprint, for free. Even though I already paid for the course before, I just never watched it. When he gave it to me for free, I'm like, okay, this guy actually gave it to me for free. Let me actually go watch this thing. Changed my life. I became a LinkedIn storyteller, and like just by telling stories on LinkedIn every single day, I've been able to build $1 million business because we attract the right students, we attract the right partners by storytelling, putting yourself out there. Right? You found out about me through LinkedIn so Toby was a key guy I networked with. Shout out to Toby, who taught me about that. But again, it's just about networking. It exposes you to so much. I started learning about his own circle. He has like friends that are making $1 million a year on the side. I'm like, what's going on? How are people doing all these things? And the 4th thing is just the books. A few books have changed my life. I don't want to, if you asked about the books, or if you ask about the books, I could talk about some of the key books. But again, technical skills, build, network, and then just read books on all sorts of topics to build that knowledge. You want to become someone who knows a lot about something, but something about everything.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for getting to this point. Like, I don't take that for granted. Please give us a like on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, follow us on Substack, follow us on YouTube. Please share this with someone who might find it interesting. Thank you so much and have a beautiful day. And cheers.